Sì, l'acqua. Sì. Good morning. Maybe we can start. I invite you to take your seat. It's a great honor for me to open this section about energy markets in time of geopolitical turmoil. I want to welcome everybody and to thank the city of Naples and Palazzo Reale for giving us this amazing space. And I want to welcome the speaker of today's section, Professor Giacomo Luciani from Geneva Graduate Institute and the Scientific Advisor of Sciences Po Paris, Dr. Firas Maksad, Managing Director for Middle East and North Africa for the Eurasia Group, Minister Sabah Mashali, Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy of Egypt, and Dr. Osama Mubarak, Secretary General for the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. Welcome. In this session, we will discuss the prospects for energy market in a time of geopolitical turmoil. We know that the Middle East and North Africa's energy sector is challenged by ongoing regional conflicts and economic uncertainties at a global level, and the risk of disruption of energy supply chains and facilities is mounting. At the same time, this uncertainty and the uncertainty caused by an unstable geopolitical context made energy independence even more strategic for the country that insists in this area. And it requires both energy route diversification and also to foster the energy transition and renewable energies. At the same time, the development of a resilient energy area and corridors is a key factor for the development of all the area. And so we will discuss with our speaker how this sector has been impacted by all these problems and turmoil, and how the countries are trying to coping with this problem. I will start with Professor Luciani. Thank you for being with us and welcome. And the question for you is, what are the emerging scenarios in this context for energy market in coming months, and at the same time, what development do you see for oil market and gas market in the area? Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. As I'm sure many of you are aware, over the past year or so, there has been a considerable reevaluation of scenarios about the future of energy, because after many years in which the International Energy Agency had been saying that what the policies that are in place are not sufficient to reach net zero, but nevertheless kept proposing the net zero scenario by 2050 as a benchmark for judging investment and other and policies. It has now been recognized that the goal of reaching net zero by 2050 is not attainable. This is, of course, bad news from the point of view of climate change. However, it is a reality, and it is with reality that we need to deal. In particular, not only 2024 has been a year of exceptionally fast increase in CO2 emissions, but the demand for both oil and gas keeps growing. There is a discussion ongoing about how quickly and for how long this demand will continue to grow. The International Energy Agency believes that this will not be the case for long, but the fact is that we don't see a decline or even a stagnation of oil demand, and even less so for gas, whose demand is bound to increase more rapidly anyhow. Today, the market for oil is mostly influenced by the change in the strategy of Saudi Arabia, which occurred in the early months of this year. After many years in which Saudi Arabia has been pursuing a price objective, never officially announced, but informally understood as being $100 per barrel. The kingdom has come to terms with the fact that this strategy was not delivering the intended objective. It was constraining Saudi production, allowing other countries to increase their production, including the United States, who have been the largest producer of oil for 2 or 3 years now, and whose exports are increasing rapidly. And therefore, it was decided that it was time to recover market share, go back and exploit the existing production capacity, increasing and rescinding some of the cuts that had been introduced earlier. So there is more supply on the market, and that is leading to some decline in prices. Some people expected a harsher decline than what we have seen so far. However, what will happen to prices in the next few months is not unanimously judged. Some people believe that by early next year, early 2026, prices might head towards $50 a barrel. Others believe that this will not be the case, essentially because demand will be higher than expected by the International Energy Agency and others. So undoubtedly, we are heading towards a period of relatively moderate oil prices. However, it should be well understood that this is a parenthesis, because demand will keep on growing slowly, but growing. The tapering off of demand is not visible on the horizon. It may happen sometime in the next decade, but not. It's unlikely that it happens before. And consequently, at some point, demand will catch up with the higher supply that is currently being injected into the market, and prices will increase again. Just today on the Financial Times, you see an interview with Amin Nasser of Saudi Aramco, where he correctly points to the fact that investment in oil and gas exploration and production has been very low lately. And the International Energy Agency has published a report highlighting that production is naturally declining because of the exhaustion of fields. And therefore, if we don't go back to investing and at the same time demand keeps increasing, prices will necessarily increase. How soon, how fast, that's entirely to be seen. But we are at the moment in a trough of oil prices, which will probably lead to a new increase towards the end of the decade. For gas, the situation is also one of rapidly increasing production, especially for LNG. The increase in LNG capacity over the next 2 or 3 years is expected to be 50% of existing capacity, so a very large increase in Qatar, in the United States, and also in other parts of the world where gas is available. Demand for gas is rapidly increasing anyhow. Globally, there is huge consumption of coal for power generation. Demand for coal keeps increasing.
Thank you, Professor.
And first priority in terms of reducing CO2 emission is and should be to substitute coal with gas wherever it is possible to do so. So this whole idea, gas is a transitional fuel, a transitional energy source, correct, but we are speaking about a transition that will last in between 50 and 100 years, so I mean, it's not something that needs to concern us in the immediate. So,
thank you, Professor Luciani. Maybe we will continue to go deep in later. My second question is for Minister Mashali. How the Egyptian energy sector has been impacted by 2 years of war in the Middle East and is still impacted by the high uncertainty in the area, and how Cairo is trying to cope with this situation.
Okay, Yani, thank you very much for being here. I'm happy that I am participating in this very important dialogue and in this very beautiful building. Yeah. Concerning the challenges we faced through the last 2 years because the world war and the uncertainty, actually they are a lot of challenging. First of all, it was the fluctuation of the energy prices worldwide because of the wars and the uncertainties. It was one of the challenges which impacted us, of course, by increasing our importing bill very high, which has also resulted in a lot of pressure on our domestic economy. This was one of the challenges. The other one was the disruption in the supply chain, which of course affected the logistics of the arrival of shipping, the timing of receiving equipment. A lot of issues concerning the stability of supply chain affected our projects, especially because of the instability in the area of Red Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean especially. The third challenge was actually the slowdown of investment, or you can say the investment hesitation from the international investors, because during the uncertainty time, nobody is willing to take high risk and to come to invest in mega projects. The final challenge, as I mentioned, was the pressure on our economy, which of course put a lot of pressure on the government in order to keep continuing to give the society an energy affordable prices. How we mitigate this and how we يعني cope with these challenges, يعني actually we had a strategy which was mainly concentrating on 3 pillars. The first one was the diversification of energy resources. And in this direction, we increased massively the participation and the share of renewable energy and adopted a new strategy which rely much more and more on renewable resources. And you may be aware about يعني some mega projects which rely on solar and wind. We have one of the biggest solar parks in the area or in the world in Upper Egypt in Bimban, and also some mega projects in Gulf of Suez. It is a wind project. This is one aspect. The other one is integration. We increased our integration of new interconnections with our neighbors because Egypt now is connected electrically with Jordan, Sudan, Libya, and currently we are about to finalize a mega project interconnector with Saudi Arabia, which will transfer almost about 3 giga in the 2 sides and rely on a very high tech on high voltage DC converter station. The third adaptation mechanism was the reform. We adopted a very good reform regulations which encourage the participation of the private sector to be part of our new strategy to increase the renewable energy in our energy mix. يعني in short, I do believe the challenges created during the instability time also created a lot of opportunities in order to secure your energy mix and to rely on more sustainable resources which was not يعني adapted before this war of crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I have a question for Dr. Mubarak. We know that in the Eastern Mediterranean region, energy has represented both a catalyst for cooperation and a source of geopolitical tensions. According to you, despite the uncertainty and the problem that the area is still facing, what are the prospects and fields of energy cooperation in the region?
Thank you very much. It's great to be back to Rome Med Dialogues, and it's great to be here in this gorgeous palace. And it's great to be among these distinguished panelists. So I think the Eastern Mediterranean, the least to say, is a very geopolitically sensitive and vulnerable to different challenges. But at the same time, it has a lot of potential for energy resources, gas discoveries, in addition to potential to find more gas discoveries. And the whole concept of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum is how can we turn the gas resources, the energy resources in general, to be more of a catalyst for stability. And maybe we have an opportunity to change the classical concept of energy as fuel for conflict to be a catalyst for stability. And the idea is that all the resources underground does not have any value. To make value out of this, we need to develop them, extract it, develop it, and bring it to the markets. And our idea is how can we bring the different countries, governments, and also the different companies operating in the region and maybe attract also more companies to do this. And to do that, we need to create interests and value added to each stakeholder of these. And I think we have, to some extent, we have been successful. We have some examples already happening, gas already flowing within the region, different parties, that has value for the producers because it generates values, for the transit countries, and also for the consumer and eventually to Europe as a source of diversification. And the recent example of this success is the agreements between Cyprus and Egypt. Cyprus had several discoveries that has been there for several years, but due to different challenges, they were not able to develop it. But this agreement says that these discoveries of this gas will be brought to Egypt, some of it for the domestic market, some of it will be liquefied in the existing infrastructure and re-exported to Europe. So this is good for the Cypriot government because it will enable them to develop the discoveries. It's good for Egypt because some of this will fulfill the domestic demand and will operate the infrastructure. And it's also good for the companies because they will generate revenues, and eventually good for Europe for diversification. And I believe the recent agreement that was signed a few days ago in Cairo would hopefully change the setup of the geopolitics in the region. It still have challenges, it is still complicated, but we hope that with the support of the US, with the support of the different parties that witnessed the signing of this agreement, we can move forward not just to stop the war, but also to create the political setup that is ready and favorable to do more. And we believe through more integration of the economies, interdependencies, and especially of energy, we can try to withstand the political disputes and conflicts.
Thank you. Dr. Maksad, as Dr. Mubarak just said, the situation is still very uncertain, but the agreement signed in Cairo gives us some hope. And so my question for you is, what, according to you, will be the main geopolitical shocks that could impact energy market in the next year? There will be a more stable situation thanks to the agreement just signed?
Well, first, at the risk of repeating what my fellow panelists said, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. And, I come from Washington, D.C., ostensibly the political capital of the world. We have nothing like this, so Napoli is beautiful. So this is the part of the panel where we get into politics. And if you're interested in politics rather than just energy markets, I hope you tune in. As a follower and a student of geopolitical risk, I want to start out by being somewhat humble. Because at least since 2022, there has been quite a divergence between the degree of geopolitical risk in the market space and where oil prices have been. The impact has been rather muted given the changes at hand on the global stage. I'm talking about the war in Ukraine and the sanctions that followed, the price caps, the disruptions to supply, and yet we saw that oil prices were fairly stable, if not muted. Obviously, the 12-day war between Israel and Iran, the first time that these two countries were engaged in kinetic action directly, rather than via proxies, in 3 stages, the last of which was the 12-day war, including an American attack that quite diminished Iran's nuclear program. Certainly, seeing oil tankers on fire in the Red Sea corridor and off the Horn of Africa is also a reason for energy markets to react. Yet again, the reaction has been quite muted. So there are forces at play here that go beyond my purview in geopolitical risk and much more relevant to what the professor spoke about, market demand and supply mechanisms. But nonetheless, geopolitical risk is a single important factor that we have to continue to think about. And in the coming year, in 2026, as we look at the forces at play, particularly in the Middle East region, the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, the ceasefire, we very much think about Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu in particular, his politics, his ambitions, where we're going. And we think about what we call sort of Bibi Unleashed in 2026. While it's very true and very welcome that we finally have a ceasefire in Gaza, one that I would say is very fragile at the moment, lots of question about whether phase 2 can be implemented. 1,000 tripwires, many things that can go wrong. And it's very much a conflict that's still being negotiated. We have phase one in play, and even the implementation of phase one is having some difficulties. The various aspects of President Trump's 20-point plan, which is a general framework without necessarily the implementation mechanisms and the time horizons that are required to go along with it, those are still being negotiated. But even if we are to assume the best case scenario, where the conflict in Gaza does begin to wind down in some shape or form, and I believe that it will. Even if phase two of the ceasefire doesn't completely hold, major military operations of the kind that we have been witnessing for the past 2 years are most likely behind us. It's going to be very difficult for the Israeli Prime Minister, after the hostages have been returned, to justify yet again the mobilization of Israeli society and the Israeli military for a major campaign in Gaza. So as things in Gaza wind down, what does that mean for the region? Well, Israel has an election in 2026. It might be towards the first half of the year. The furthest that we can go without an election in Israel is in the October-November timeframe. And so there is both a political incentive for Netanyahu in the lead up to elections and a strategic imperative to go elsewhere in the region. There is unfinished business, as far as Israel is concerned, in Iran, not only with the nuclear program, but more importantly with Iran's ballistic missile program. And yes, President Trump has sounded somewhat optimistic in recent weeks about Iran, and there is perhaps a channel between the US, between Washington and Tehran right now. But it's very difficult for me to imagine Iran negotiating its ballistic missile program away when it is that much more dependent on these ballistic missiles for its defense. Hezbollah, arguably its first line of defense in Lebanon, is significantly degraded. The Assad regime is no longer there. The Houthis are certainly on their back foot. So they're not going to negotiate their ballistic missile program away. And both for political and for strategic reasons, Netanyahu has an incentive to go after Iran yet another time, and to perhaps even Hezbollah with unfinished business in Lebanon, because let's face it, the Lebanese government is in no position to disarm Hezbollah as stipulated by the ceasefire in place since last November. And so that's going to create a great deal of geopolitical risk in a key part of the world. Now, is that going to transition, and is that going to have an impact on oil prices? Well, it depends. What we saw in the past round of conflict between Israel and Iran is that Israel very much operated within President Trump's red lines. And so Israel did not go after Iran's energy infrastructure. Israel did not go after its export terminal, Iran's export terminal. Heart Island alone is responsible for 90% of Iran's export to the global market. And so if you want to take Iran offline in terms of energy supplies, it's very easy for the Israelis to go ahead and do that. They didn't do that because they understand that President Trump in particular is sensitive to where oil prices are going to be, the impact on the global economy, the impact on the American economy, but also because the US has security commitments and guarantees elsewhere in the region, particularly in the GCC. And if we are to see in round two that kind of Israeli military action that seeks also to go after really the financial pipeline into the Iranian regime, then you can expect that there will be consequences in terms of Iranian retaliation elsewhere in the GCC against energy installations. And so this is a scenario that is really troubling us as we look into it, because we truly believe there's an elevated risk of another round between Israel and Iran. But we think that some of the same constraints that existed in the previous rounds still exist today, and therefore that Israeli action will be fairly limited. There's obviously the Houthis and the risk that that continues to pose for the Red Sea corridor. We have an election in Iraq in November that could also very much have a political fallout and supply disruptions as a result of that. But no doubt, the big geopolitical risk in the month ahead is going to be Israel and what happens on the back end of the Gaza ceasefire. Ironically, even if successful, Netanyahu, for political and strategic reasons, going elsewhere.
Thank you very much. I should ask to all of you to answer the next question as shortly as possible because the time is passing. My next question is for Minister Mashali. Do you agree with this perspective, first of all? And then you already talked a little bit about the investment that Egypt has for renewable energy. My question is, what are the prospects for green energy exports for Egypt and the challenges ahead in the alignment of Egypt with its energy commitment? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Concerning my perspective about what the politics can make in the economy of this region, I do agree that we are alerted about what is going to happen next after the decision of stopping the war in Gaza. All of us are alerted, and we are very cautious that we are, as already mentioned, politically, for the 20 point of Trump, there is an action plan. And this is something, worried all the region for the commitment of all the stakeholders in this agreement. Go back to the green strategy for energy in Egypt. We recently, since 2 years ago, adopted a new strategy for year 2040. This strategy targeted almost about 42% from renewable in our electricity generation mix by year 2030. And I do believe now, due to the current circumstances, we are accelerating this target. It may happen before 2030. The other target is to achieve more than 60% from renewable resources by 2040. And I do believe we are able to do this. I will mention the challenges in order to achieve these targets, but Egypt have a plenty of good places for wind and solar, and I do believe we put a very good mechanisms for the private sector participation to guarantee that this strategy will be implemented. And I do believe we already contracted on several mega projects with international players in this field, which guarantee that, inshallah, hopefully we will achieve our target. Going back to the challenges, I can list 3 of them. The first one is how to get a good finance for these renewable energy projects. Because for such mega projects, you need a longer term and a low-cost finance, which is sometimes very difficult to obtain. The second challenge is the grid stability. You know that because of the nature type of renewable energy, it is non-dispatchable energy, and you have to have a very resilient national grid. And we are now working very hard to have a very stable and resilient grid in order to cope with this massive penetration of renewable energy. The third one is the capacity building and the technology transfer. Because you are dealing with new tech, you have to have a very good, talented engineers and technicians in order to be adapted with this new era of green transition, like the battery storage, the hydrogen projects. A lot of things it should be adapted. Just a small mention about the green projects. I do believe Egypt, one of the highest countries which adopted and attracted a lot of investors in this field, and we already succeeded to sign more than 20 framework agreements with different developers in this green hydrogen projects as well. Thank you.
Dr. Mubarak, talking about the development of renewable energy in the area, according to you, there's room to relaunch regional cooperation based on green energy, despite all the difficulties that we already discussed?
Yes, I believe there is a great opportunity, as Minister Mashali said, the interconnectors between Egypt and different countries, and also there are several projects, the GRIGI between Egypt and Greece, between Egypt and Cyprus, and also discussions between Egypt and Italy, and different parts of in the region. And although the EMGF is focusing currently on gas, but I think when you talk about energy, you cannot just separate one source from another. And again, it's with the main objective of the EMGF, how can we turn energy into a catalyst for more stability and more resilience, not just in energy and the economy, but also for the political stability as well.
Thank you. And now we are back to Professor Luciani. We know that some states in the main area are investing in the development of hydrogen. And what do you think? And in particular, what, according to you, will be the prospects for this kind of industry?
Thank you. It is clear, it has been said many times, and it is certainly true, that the MENA region is ideal, is one of the most favorable regions for the development of renewable energy sources, both in terms of solar and wind. The theoretical resources are very large. So that the region will develop renewables, I think, is not in doubt, although the uptake is very much differentiated in between countries. Some countries are serious about developing and investing in renewables, others are not, for a variety of reasons, including domestic political instability, and that is, of course, to be recognized. The question, therefore, is to what extent the development of renewable energy sources will be primarily directed to satisfying domestic demand, and to what extent instead it might be directed towards exports, in particular towards producing green hydrogen and exporting green hydrogen. And there, I think there has been a tendency, especially in certain European countries, notably Germany, to pursue the possibility, the hypothesis that hydrogen can be imported in large volumes from several countries, not just MENA. However, increasingly, it is becoming clear that the cost of doing so is probably quite prohibitive. And there is a lack of demand, even where memorandums of understanding have been signed in between governments. Governments then do not implement what they sign for. It's companies that do so. And actual demand for green hydrogen has not been available. So that translates into financing difficulties, obviously, and so on and so forth, and nothing happens. I am a believer that renewable energy sources and also hydrogen, green hydrogen, may be developed for local consumption, domestic consumption. There is a lot of growth in electricity demand in these countries anyhow, and therefore there is no need to be looking at exports. I see it.
Yeah,
it is
so
red.
sorry.
I have to shut up.
One last question for Dr. Maksad. We know that the digital transition will have a huge impact on energy market, in particular AI, cloud computing, and so are likely to impact the demands. And how this transition will shape or reshape the energy transition.
And I've got just
yes,
over a minute to
very
answer.
short, I'm sorry.
Okay, let's go. Listen, the statistics speak very clearly, and they're through the roof in terms of what the expected energy demand from AI, strategic tech, cloud computing is going to be. Those are going to be the industries that power the future of the global economy. It's a quadrupling of demand coming from AI for electricity in the coming 5 years by 2030. It's tenfold in the US market alone. And so there's going to be a hunger for electricity and for energy as a result of these new industries in the future. Strategically, geopolitically, particularly in the part of the world that's closer to us, what does that mean? Why is it that the President of the United States twice, not once, chooses to go to the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, as the first foreign visit abroad? It's not only because President Trump, perhaps, and those around him have personal interests in the GCC, it is because there's a strategic convergence that's taking place. Despite the fact that there is quite a bit of hiccups in the relationship as a result of what is perceived as a lacking American security umbrella, lacking American guarantees, most famously on display recently with the Israeli attack on Doha, Qatar. But in the greater picture of strategic competition between the US and China, to dominate the industries of the future, America needs these energy-rich, capital-intensive, deep-pocket countries of the GCC. So I expect that relation to deepen in the future, and I think that nuclear also, in terms of the energy mix, is going to be increasingly important, and hence why we see countries like Saudi Arabia, but also the UAE, who have plenty of hydrocarbons, looking right now to invest in civil nuclear energy, because that's what's required to fuel the industries of the future.
Thank you, Dr. Maksad. I want to thank again Professor Luciani, Minister Mashali, and Dr. Mubarak. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you.